really I'm very proud, sir, that you have made it to the IAS in 1980, standing All India rank 4. Some of his achievements during a 16-year-long career in government include: as a joint collector, he created full and permanent employment for 8,000 youth from displaced families of the Visakhapatnam steel plant. As collector of East Godavari district, he spearheaded the reconstruction of drainage and irrigation network in Krishna, Prakasham and Godavari deltas. As collector of Prakasham district, he successfully mobilized farmers on a large scale to take up irrigation schemes to bring a record 2 lakh acres under irrigation. He strengthened the credit cooperatives by making them independent of government control. He served as a secretary to both Governor Krishnakant and the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Mr. N.T. Ramarao. To continue, because there is a lot, but I would definitely talk a little because I think it runs into pages. Mr. Narayana is a founder member of Foundation for Democratic Reforms, FDR, and currently he serves as its General Secretary. It's one of India's leading think tanks and research resource centers for formulating and promoting fundamental reforms in political, electoral, and governance spheres and in critical areas of state policy. He's the advisor of Youth Parliament Program, YPP. Youth Parliament is an ideal platform for socially conscious youth to express their views, ideas, and to act as a change agent in national building process. He started the Lok Satta movement in 1996 to educate the citizens of India about voting, rights, and government. It has emerged today as India's leading civil society initiative for governance reforms and is at the forefront of key initiatives like disclosure of candidate wealth and criminal history details, political funding reform, decriminalization of politics, improvement of electoral registration, comprehensive judicial reforms, including local courts and National Judicial Commission and citizen charters. It has been the driving force in achieving the following governance reforms in many recent years, like substantial reduction in short delivery of petroleum products in all retail outlets, and improvements in voter registration, and so on. I can go on, but we are all waiting to listen to you to speak, sir. May I invite you for your expert talk on transforming management education. Thank you.
Friends, if I'm a smart man, I should shut up now. For two reasons. The first is this is lunch period, a terrible time to talk. The second is I really cannot claim expertise in management education. You know, I manage some of the public institutions. I really don't have no expertise in private management. Long ago, I was MD of a sugar factory. Don't ask me how public service is connected to sugar factory management. That's the way India is managed, at least was managed. I was special officer of Vizag steel plant. I was not managing the plant, but I was managing many incidental issues arising out of creation of the steel plant. That is when I discovered that public sector in India is the private sector of those in public office. It has nothing to do with the people of the country. One of the more curious things is I headed two apex cooperative banks in the then Andhra Pradesh without knowing anything about banking. I had zero knowledge of banking, and I headed the banks without even understanding what was happening in the banks. I dutifully went to two of my predecessors, both of whom later occupied high constitutional offices in this country. I took copious notes from them. But the two most important things relevant to those institutions were were not briefed to me. Not because they wanted to conceal the facts, but because despite heading those banks, they were completely unaware of what was happening. What were the two things? At the time when I took over those banks, the recovery rate on 100 rupees lent to the people, recovery rate was 8 rupees on 100, 8%. The bank was on the verge of collapse. The second, as a consequence of that, my default to my lender, the National Bank, were the highest in the history of India at that time. I took over the banks without knowing anything about these two central facts about the bank's management. I think it's a miracle that the banks survived me. Then, of course, I headed the Industrial Infrastructure Corporation, agro-industries, etc. For all these reasons, I think I should, as I said, maintain silence. 2,500 years ago, a disciple of Socrates had a difficulty like mine today. He stood up and said, "Master, for 20 years I listened to you and my other colleagues interacting with you on a variety of issues. I never once opened my mouth. Was it right or was it wrong that I didn't open my mouth?" he asked. Socrates, the great philosopher that he was, he gave an answer which was relevant for all times and for all of us. He said, "If you are a wise man, then you are a fool. If you are a fool, then you are a wise man." It took me some time to decipher. He said, if you are wise, if your words have some relevance to other people's lives, by concealing your wisdom, you are a fool. But if you're a fool anyway, you have nothing to contribute to public good. By concealing your ignorance, you are wise. So what I propose to do is in about 4 or 5 minutes, I'll just make a few points and leave it open to a few questions and interaction. First, what exactly should a manager accomplish? What is the purpose of management? In a competitive environment, unlike the public sector management in regulation, in control, in monopoly, in license, in permit and quota raj, obviously we have to meet the standards of competition, choice, value addition, adaptation to changing conditions and therefore becoming continuously relevant, and at all times promoting creation of goods and services. I was delighted when Lokiraju talked about the difference between money and wealth. Money is a piece of paper or a statement. Wealth is creation of goods and services that are relevant to human lives. If money is earned sans creation of goods and services, it's no longer management or wealth. It is accumulation or speculation or outright plunder. So true management is about creation of wealth. And what are the tools available? The first is the principle of levers. That we as human society, unlike any other animal, can do a lot with little. That tasks which are seemingly impossible can be accomplished if you know how to leverage our strengths. Other animals haven't learned that. And the second is that we alone have the capacity to work in large numbers. And therefore, how do you bring synergy rather than discord? How do you get the best out of us and coordinate among us? These are the two central tasks of management. In the Indian context, what is it that we need if we really have to make management work? I think Praveen made a reference to PISA. Let me go into it for a minute. When there was a survey, this PISA survey, in which India participated some years ago, PISA measures at the age of 15 the basic educational outcomes, the way they should be, not the way they are in India, not rote learning and not mass copying and getting grades and marks and ranks, but real school education. ability to communicate and grasp what is communicated, ability to understand basic mathematical principles and apply them in real life, ability to apply logic and arrive at reasonable conclusions on the given facts. That is what science is. When India participated in a PISA survey, out of 74 nations and entities surveyed, can anybody guess what India's rank was? There's one candidate for 70s. Anybody else? We were 73rd out of 74 countries. Our self-images were up there because without us, Google will not function, Microsoft will go bankrupt, and all kinds of things. Now, India is the fulcrum of all economic growth and technology in the world. That is our self-image. But the truth is, we were somewhere at the bottom. Luckily, there was a country called Kyrgyzstan in that list. We were therefore spared the ignominy of being the last. Not because we lack brains, not because our parents don't sacrifice for their kids, not because governments don't focus on education and spend a lot of money, not because society doesn't value education. We have all the right things in place. All boxes are checked. But we forgot the basic ingredient of education and the purpose of education. Therefore, rote learning and mass copying have become endemic. We are looking at a few who are flourishing because we have innate potential. Because of good fortune, the parents' hard work, the child's ability, the teacher's blessings, and the right institutional environment, they're allowing some of these kids to fulfill their potential. But this number never exceeds 15 or 20% in India, at the most, even that by diluting standards. 80% have simply no chance. It's like, they have a piece of paper, but there's zero education or near zero education. No, you cannot either manage or be a productive member of a society without the basic education. You don't require to be a topper or anything. It's irrelevant to what rank you get. But if the basic tools of navigating in a complex society and creating wealth, if they're not there, then there simply is no possibility of the individual or even the collective making a huge difference. So I would say, take care of the foundations. And look at higher education. In 1869, the year of birth of Mahatma Gandhi, Charles Eliot, he became the president of Harvard. He then introduced a system of electives. That was about 150, 160 years ago. Now, 150 plus years later, for the first time, we are the last country among major economies in the world. The national education policy talks about an elective system. We have yet not introduced it. 150 years it has taken. 1869, that man became Harvard president, introduced electives at that time. We are hopelessly behind times. We are hopelessly behind times. Our pretense that we are doing superbly well is nonsensical, not because we have no ability. Our kids are very bright, no question about it. That you're bright, that you have the potential doesn't mean that you've done anything at all. Only when it's realized can you really talk about your place in the world. So we have a lot to do to really make things happen. But as I said, we are lucky because the basic ingredients are in place. It's just that we managed it horribly. Horribly. When I talked about PISA ranking, way back in 2009 this happened, India participated in that. My hope at the time was that the government and the policymakers and others will recognize where we are and try to figure out why are we so bad? What can be done to improve it? Because we have so many ingredients in place to make it better. I thought I always had some understanding of public policy, governments, politics, how they respond, and I'm a bit of a chess player in that sense. I make my moves very carefully, I look at the 10th possible move and then prepare for that. I expected the governments to respond in a certain manner, but their response was striking and totally, it was shocking to me. I didn't anticipate that. They said India will not participate in PISA surveys in future. Instead of improving the educational outcomes and figuring out what to do, our response to PISA failing is India will not participate in PISA surveys in future. Like ostrich in the sand, we forget where we are, we pretend that we are doing well, and that's it. Nobody can question, nobody can criticize. And since then, 14 years, India has not participated in PISA surveys. Not that PISA survey is a solution to all problems, but if we don't even know where we are, we obviously cannot improve. So if we don't improve the quality of education, critical thinking, innovation, you cannot provide leadership, you cannot improve management. You don't require marks and grades, but you require the basic tools of education. The second thing that bothers me of late is the short-termism, the quarterly balance sheets. Globally, it's not merely an Indian problem. I find it shocking that the manager thinks only over the next 3 months. That's the horizon. I have no quarrel about the profit being a goal, but if all you can think of is a 3-month horizon, I think it's a tragedy in the long term, because we often underestimate our capacity to bring about long-term changes and overestimate our ability to transform the world in the short term. This absurdity must give way to some kind of a balance. Yes, of course, short term is required. As Henry Ford said, in the long term, we are all dead. But it doesn't mean that the 3-month horizon is what really should keep us going. It's a terrible mistake. The third is, and this is the last point I want to make, there's immense opportunity within the country, India as a country, and the globe, obviously. India, the growth. Despite many bunglings, there appears to be a reasonable opportunity for us to grow at about 7% or thereabout for the next 20, 30 years, unless we do spectacularly badly in some respects, and we are capable of doing spectacularly badly. But there is a chance, without going into details. But I want you to recognize 2 issues. One, between a 7% growth rate sustained and 8% growth rate sustained, the difference is phenomenal. And between 5% and 8%, it's simply unbelievable. For instance, if you take 7 and 8% growth rates in a period of 9 to 10 years, the difference will be $600 billion production per year. In government revenue terms alone, that will mean about 10 lakh crores additional revenue if the growth rate is 8% per year. So these numbers are not mere numbers. It's not 7 versus 8. It's a phenomenal difference with compound growth rate and the long term. We lost out because of lack of ambition and the ability to translate ideas into action over the past 60, 70 years. China spectacularly progressed because they did most things right to achieve extremely high growth rates on a sustained basis for 3-4 decades. We are capable of doing that, but only if we set things right. What can go wrong spectacularly? I want all the managers to pay attention. It's not an internal factor. It's not an intrinsic to your industry or enterprise, but unless you understand the big picture and then raise your voice, I think all our growth will go afoot. Public finances are increasingly in distress in this country. Partly because of the short-termism of politicians, because I want to win the election today, therefore short-term individual welfare measures at the cost of long-term growth and building the economic sinews of the country. But even worse, a terrible old pension scheme, there's no time to go into details, those who are interested we can discuss later, a terrible old pension scheme which is unique to India, unfunded, without putting money in today's budget for future pensions, index-linked. It's not merely a reasonable pension, but continuously growing. People who retire at 20,000 rupees salary get 70,000 rupee pension. Index-linked, permanent liability, legal liability from which we cannot withdraw, available only to a small segment of the working population of India, 3.3% of workers of India, at the cost of the rest of the people. In the last 20 years, if you take all the Indian states together, from 33,000 crores of total pension burden annually, it has now become 4,06,000 crores. 13-fold increase, 13-fold increase in just 20 years. It's shooting up. 20 years ago, a wise government under a wise leader looked into the future and came up with what is called the national pension system, on par with the rest of the world. The individual and the employer put the money there, available to everybody in the country, in the rest of the world, but here only for government employees even this. And from that pension fund, pensions will be given so that we know how much we owe to the future. That money is put in the budget, we spend it. We don't transfer the burden to the next generation, the taxpayers 30 years later. A sensible thing. World over, that's what is done. It's been practiced for the past 18 years, but suddenly, because of the organized sector demand from the government employees, the political parties no longer have the courage to resist these demands of the small minority of only 3.3% of the workers' population, and they're willing to hurt the rest of the people of India. Because the rest of the people are unmindful of what is happening, because the 3.3% are very sharp. They know exactly what is at stake for themselves, and they have voice, they have influence, and they have collective bargaining power, they're organized. State after state is now on the verge of bankruptcy. I can assure you, all managers, or those who intend to be managers, if we don't fix this one central issue today, you can forget management in Indian enterprises in this country. There will be zero growth. And every educational institution, every young person, every manager, everybody who's interested in public policy, if we don't pay attention and raise voice from the rest of the 97% of the working population of India, then our lives, our future will be in jeopardy. That apart from the obvious innovation and enterprise and entrepreneurship that every manager is thinking about all the time, remember, even providing the public goods, there is tremendous role for the private sector. Education already is happening. This institution, for instance, is an example. These are public goods provided now by the private sector very efficiently. Without competition and choice, there is no way we can improve the quality of public goods. And therefore, there's immense possibility for enterprises to utilize this as an opportunity in healthcare, in education, a whole lot of other things. There must be public services, publicly funded in most part, but they can be better managed by public-private partnership. Therefore, do not ignore that important area, even as you go for normal enterprise activities. And the third element, as far as India is concerned, is in situ urbanization is the way of the future. We're all very fond of our Hyderabad city or Mumbai or Chennai, Bengaluru, etc. But you cannot simply grow these cities indefinitely and then starve the rest of India. That's a terrible way of managing these cities and the country. There's no reason why low-skilled people from distant villages, eking out a precarious livelihood, have to move to distant cities, big cities, without any support system and leading lives of desperation. That's a recipe for disaster. Unless small towns grow, unless we make them work as innovators and job creators, economic hubs locally, so that they can attract local migration from a defined geography in the large part, India will have tremendous crisis in demographic management. So look at this carefully. As far as the global issue is concerned, obviously we have a fantastic opportunity today because technology is changing with such breathtaking rapidity. The kind of things that were unthinkable 30 years ago, though we had an idea of the technology available, they were simply unaffordable. Solar power was known 50, 30, 40 years ago. But today, for the first time in human history, we know that the world of tomorrow is going to be radically different. This year, 2023, is witnessing for the first time a decline in the use of fossil fuels in generation of electricity. First time after Industrial Revolution. 2023 is a watershed year. If we take the combined total power generated with coal, with gas and oil, that has actually come down, or is coming down this year compared to last year for the first time. Otherwise, so far it's been shooting off. 40% of the total power generated today in the world is through renewable sources. It's either solar power or wind power or nuclear power or hydropower. So the world is changing. This is only one example, yes or no. There are many, many other, somebody mentioned ChatGPT and a whole lot of other things. It's a fantastic opportunity. But it's also a potential risk if you don't move with times. If you take the world's biggest companies, I think 9 out of 10 did not exist about 25, 30 years ago. The great giants of 25, 30 years ago are nowhere today. You can reasonably say that many of these will not exist 25 years hence. That's the speed at which the world is changing. And the other side of it is 70% of the jobs that our young people are going to hold 25 years later have not yet been created. There was a reference to ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, how new kinds of skills are required to create new kinds of jobs. That's just one example. So are we, as managers, as educational enterprises, as a society, creating the kind of workforce required, with the kind of skills and adaptability and flexibility required to meet monumental challenges, because never before in human history has there been such spectacular change in such a short span of time. This is absolutely unprecedented. We are still antiquated in our approach, in our ideas, in our thinking, in our education. We have to move radically. I'm a great optimist. I truly believe that the world today is much better than what it was 30, 40 years ago. People with gray hair like me, we have this tendency to think of the wonderful halcyon days of the past, how glorious things were, and how terrible today is. I don't agree with that. I believe today is infinitely better than what it was 30 or 40 years ago, everywhere in the world, particularly in countries like India. And 20 years hence, it will be much better. But it's not our birthright to have a better world. We have to work for that. We have to think a little bit. We have to plan a little bit. We have to synergize. Above all, we must come out of this splendid isolation, working in silos. We are required to integrate, synergize. Because today, you cannot say this skill is different from that skill. Every skill has to come together. This is a world of integration and aggregation. I'm sure that if we harness our skills and energies, put our brains together, A, will give opportunity to every single child, not to few lucky or privileged ones. And B, we can curb some of the potential dangers that are ahead of us, particularly for a country like India, with the governments messing up the finances. Because without the government finances being in a reasonable shape, think of what Sri Lanka is going through today, or Pakistan is going through, or many other countries are going through. If that's what our fate is in the future, you can give up on growth. I believe we can address those challenges. Even if other political and governance problems continue to plague us, we can radically reshape our country, our society, and the global human society. And we can truly ensure that our children inherit a better world. I'm sure that will be a reality. I wish you all the very best. I'm sorry I kept you away from lunch for such a long time. If you have a question or two, we'll take it. Otherwise, we'll quickly adjourn for lunch, and I'll go to some other event that I have. I wish you all the very best. Good luck and thank you.
In culture, even in education system, we are emphasizing more on foreign theories. I'm not denying the fact that they're good, but they're very helpful for us. But as we are doing that, so the tiny human beings at the early stage, that they are thinking that after education, the life is at the foreign, outside the country. So in order to retain the knowledge and help them to develop the country, so how do we manage education system to inculcate and get the love and affection towards the country, and to develop the more entrepreneurs from the country as well?
I don't buy the idea that there is a foreign education and foreign learning. I reject that notion. We are all inheritors of all of humanity's collective wisdom and knowledge. Each of us, each society contributed to that. At one time, India may have contributed a little more, China may have contributed a little more. Maybe now our contribution relatively is a little less, but we are hoping to grow that share. But to say that something is foreign in terms of knowledge or science or technology, it doesn't make any sense to me because we are giving up the rich legacy of humanity. Please remember, I think every student must be taught elements of anthropology. Where have we come from? About 75, 80,000 years ago, our ancestors, most of the geneticists say, probably about 3 or maybe 6 mothers. They migrated. One group migrated towards the east, came via the coast, the Gulf countries, and via the west coast of India, east coast of India, Southeast Asia, up to Australia. Another group went a little to the northeast, and therefore went over Central Asia, current-day China, Siberia. And some of you may or may not be aware, they actually walked from Siberia to today's Alaska. Human beings walked because that was the time of ice age, and sea levels were 300 to 600 feet below current level. It was freezing cold with massive winds, but they braved and walked. And then they crossed the Alaskan Ridge about 3,000 years later, and then populated the whole of American continents, the north and south. A third group went straight north to Europe. We are the heirs of these 6 mothers, wherever we are. And to say that the 75,000 years of human history and culture and civilization and knowledge, we deny ourselves because of this parochialism is nonsensical. That does not mean that we don't have roots. I am very proud of the tradition of our society, our culture. These two can come together. If you are isolationist in the name of tradition, you are actually denying yourself the best of humanity. If you allow yourself to be swept off by the currents of the global transient fashions without looking at the depth, then you are rootless. So the trick is, how do you retain the best of our tradition and discard the worst of the tradition? Remember, our tradition is not always good. How many women in each family, how many of your grandmothers had a chance to be educated? How is that a good tradition? My mother, one of the brightest human beings that I have known in life, she could not finish school because her father in that village said, my child, my girl child, cannot go to another village to study. It's an insult. Therefore, she will only study up to the level that village offers, 8th grade. How is that tradition good? Child marriage, sati, widows leading lives of fire, desperation, and slavery. How can that be good? Or casteism. But there are glorious things in our tradition too. What Rabindranath Tagore said, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of a dead habit. So unless you balance our roots and tradition and modernity in the best sense of the term and the heritage of all of humanity, we'll be isolated. So don't take these too seriously. Indians have a natural balance. We are a very balanced society on the whole. With all our imperfections, we are relatively mature and balanced. We don't allow our heads to turn with every passing wind. That's our strength. We are much more harmonious, much more sensible. Don't go to the extremes. Ati sarvatra varjayat. The middle path, middle path, the middle path. So don't buy the notion that everything that we learn just because it's in a textbook written by some author or in some other language is foreign. There's nothing foreign to me. Knowledge is knowledge, period.
Thank you so much.
Sir, one last question. Good afternoon. So you said that 150 years back, Harvard has come up with the electives, and now NEP is coming with the electives in India. So my question is, what is the biggest threat to implement NEP in India? Because we are doing this conclave to bring the vision to action. So what could be the biggest threat?
Biggest threat is apathy. We have a nice policy. We talk about it ad nauseum. India is very good about these things. Beautiful policy. Everything you say already we have a policy. This perfunctory approach, this has to be a fundamental national movement with a sense of urgency. Because every day that you delay, if there are about 2 crore children that are adding to the school-going population every year, if every day you delay, you divide 2 crores by 365, see how many children's future is sealed. So that sense of urgency, This has to be done now. It's already late. It can be done easily without spending much more money. We're spending a lot of money. Money is not the issue at all. It's just restructuring it. No, somebody talked about khanacademy.org. You have PISA, you have better systems of assessment. Basically, the central tool in the NEP, to me, there are a lot. No, every policy tries to say everything to everybody. Don't go into too much of that. But the central tenet is when the demand side is very strong in the country, everybody wants good education. The problem, the tragedy is we don't understand what is good education. We define it poorly and we measure it horribly. Address these two. Define it well, measure it well. I guarantee you, the whole country, not the governments, not the babus in government, but the whole country will transform education because it's our business. Everybody wants good education. So, go into the critical levers rather than this nitty-gritty and too much of detail and all that. Because society is the best guarantor, competition, choice, or urge to improve. Progress does not happen because of a government. Progress doesn't happen because of a leader or because of a babu. It happens because every family wants to lead a better life, give the children a better chance, and we have it already. Have we given them the tools to make their lives better? That is where the future is. I believe the central tenet is, let me reiterate, and I want you to sear this in your minds and think of it every second. Redefine success in education and measure it well and honestly. Everything else will fall in place. Once incentive is altered, everything will fall in place. I'm very optimistic, even as I understand the terrible situation of our education. I have no illusions about the level of education today. We are third rate. You know, which were the best countries in the 2009 PISA survey? China, Hong Kong, China, Singapore. There's no point pretending that we are great and thinking that we are competing with China. But we can. We are not competing today, but we can. It doesn't require plenty of money. People talk about Norway, Finland, etc. Let's do this. Then we'll go there. Be sensible. Do the practical things necessary. The rest of it, people of India will take care. Trust me. I know a thing or two about it. When somebody talked about it, 2 lakh acres of irrigation at the lowest cost in the history of India, the fastest pace, I didn't do anything. I just gave the people the tools and the incentive and removed the hurdles. The people took care of it themselves. They give me credit. People are the harbingers of progress. They are the ones who eradicate poverty. They are the ones who improve their lives. Have we created conditions to allow them to do that? That's all that we have to do. And I think, unfortunately, even today, the government thinks that they will implement NEP. No. Let them remove the hurdles and give up some of the stupidities so far perpetuated. The people will take care of it. I truly believe that. Okay?
Sir, one last question.
Okay. Must be last because I'm really conscious of the hungry stomachs and the pangs. And go on, please.
Sir, nowadays everyone is talking about India being the next, the Vishwaguru. What is the role of each Indian, be it a student, be it a parent, an educator, all of us? And, how do we get there?
You know, we all love our country. And I am, as I told you, I'm very proud of our country's civilization and history. But I'm very uncomfortable when people become braggarts. If anybody says, I'm the greatest scholar on earth, I have some suspicion. If a country says, I'm Vishwaguru, I think we'll be somewhat. Be a little humble. Talk less. Don't claim too much. Do more. I remember years ago, I think this was about 14, 15 years ago, I was arm-twisted by some friends in the global community to go to Bangladesh when there was a crisis in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh in those days, the governments were in always crisis. Before elections, the government had to resign. A chief justice takes over as the temporary prime minister or whatever, that kind of a thing. So they asked me to advise them. I was very reluctant. No, we have our country to take care of, and we are in a bit of a mess. And for me to go to another country and tell them about how they should take care of themselves is a height of hypocrisy. On top of it, I always believe that wherever I go in the world, I'm the ambassador, unofficial ambassador of my country. Therefore, for me to go and tell them how wonderful we are and how bad they are is the worst way of behaving. Very reluctantly I went. And there was a very high-powered team, the Chief Justice of the country and others were there in the audience, an eminent group headed by a Nobel laureate at the time, our Grameen Bank man, Muhammad Yunus. He was the chairman of the welcoming committee for me and all that. Very high-profile kind of a thing. You know what I did? I told them about how messy our democracy was. What are the wrong things about democracy? He said, we thought India had a fantastic democracy. What is this you're saying? I said, we are all the same Khandan. There's only one difference. We were privileged because we had some stability in the beginning and some good leadership which built institutions and certain practices. The rest of it, you and we are the same. We do the same things. Because of that advantage historically, we have regular elections, peaceful transfer of power, a few institutions and some minimal checks and balances, but otherwise we are in as much of a mess as you are. Then they were willing to listen. Then I could tell them whatever I felt was necessary to do in their country. So be a little humble. Don't ever use this Vishwaguru business. No, I'm not comfortable. I'm just not comfortable. Certainly every country, every society, every civilization has a lot to offer to other civilizations, but it's for them to recognize that and for you to very intelligently and humbly supply that. But don't overstate your credentials. It's an unsmart idea. It's counterproductive. I can assure you. That's why Deng Xiaoping, the wise man that he was, he always said, hide your strength, hide your strength, hide your strength. Keep growing. Shut up. Don't go into controversial issues. Don't even go and invade Taiwan. Next generation will take care. What's the hurry? Don't show your strength. Hide your strength. Keep growing. Keep growing. We are forgetting that message. I think as a country, we have great potential, but we should talk less, we should hide our strength, and do more. Okay then? Thank you. You have been extremely gracious and nice and sweet. At this time, now it's 2 o'clock, it's terrible. I don't know how you guys are so disciplined. They would have normally cat calls and all kinds of things. But I wish all power to your elbow because I have immense faith in the future of this country, despite the many mistakes we have committed and are continuing to commit. Because just as the earlier panel we have seen, the intelligence, the insights, the humor, the sense of confidence and purposiveness, it is so invigorating. I see it everywhere. While the bulk of Indian kids are not getting chance, their potential is not fulfilled, the few who are able to fulfill their potential, they are doing such a spectacular job. They are showing what is possible. Therefore, if we set a few things right, I'm absolutely certain that we will have a much better country. And certainly will make our contribution globally. But because if 1/6 of humanity we address the challenges, eliminate poverty, give ourselves an opportunity for every single child, see how much impact we can create on the world. I don't know what we can do the rest, but 1/6 of humanity we take care in the first place. And once we speak with one voice, with some clarity and some dignity, some humility, that will be our contribution to the globe. But first, let's take care of our people. No child must ever shed tears saying that because of the circumstances of birth, my potential is not fulfilled. I didn't have a chance in life. If any child in this country feels that, that is the greatest sin that all of us together are perpetuating. And no person should suffer from avoidable pain and disease and death. Unavoidable, there's nothing we can do. But avoidable, it's a shame. And both these sins, India is the heir to the largest amount of that. Let's have that humility. The greatest amount of unfulfilled potential, the greatest amount of avoidable suffering, they exist in India. Fix that first. The rest of it will take care of itself. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.